chosen one. It wasn't loud, that's the strange part. Something kept almost happening then, didn't. And you noticed, but not enough to stop. You brushed it off like coincidence. Like timing was just off again. But there was a pattern hiding inside those almost moments. Not obvious, not dramatic, just small shifts, missed calls, delayed answers, doors that looked open then quietly closed. And you kept moving. Because what else were you supposed to do? But there's something you didn't question. Why did it keep happening the same way? Not once, not twice. Again and again. Different situations. Same feeling. Like something was trying to get your attention without forcing it. Wait. Go back for a second. That one moment. You know the one. Where everything paused for just a second too long. Where you felt something change but couldn't explain it. Why didn't you stay there? Why did you move past it so quickly? It's not that you didn't care. It's that it didn't make sense yet. And maybe it wasn't supposed to. Because if it did, you would have acted. And if you acted, you would have gone somewhere you weren't meant to stay. Yeah, that part. You don't like thinking about that. Because it means some of what you called bad timing was actually interruption. And interruption feels frustrating until you realize what it saved you from. But no one told you that. So you kept calling it loss. You kept calling it delay. You even started wondering if you were just missing it, missing everything. But what if you weren't missing anything? What if something kept stepping in right before you made the wrong move feel right? No, don't accept that too fast, because if that's true, then it means you ignored something real. And that's uncomfortable. It means the signs weren't hidden, just quiet enough for you to doubt them. And you did. You chose logic over that subtle pull. You chose comfort over that strange pause. You chose movement when you were meant to stay still. But still something didn't let you fall all the way. Think about that. How many times did things almost collapse but didn't? How many times did you feel like you were about to lose everything and then somehow it shifted? You didn't create that shift. You just found yourself inside it. That's the part you keep skipping over, because it's easier to believe you were just lucky. But luck doesn't repeat like that. Not with that precision, not with that timing. There was intention in those interruptions, even when they hurt, especially when they hurt. You thought you were being ignored, but something kept trying again, not louder, not clearer, just closer. Closer to your patterns, closer to your decisions, closer to the exact moments where you almost went the wrong way. And still you hesitated. Not because you're weak, because you weren't ready to admit that something unseen was involved. That something knew where you were heading, knew what you couldn't see yet, knew how to stop you without forcing you. And that's why it feels like you missed it, because it didn't override you. It waited for you. So here's the uncomfortable part. What if it's still happening? What if that same quiet interruption is here again? But this time it's not going to repeat the same way, because repetition was never the goal, recognition was. And you're closer now. Not fully there, but not where you were either. You started noticing things you used to ignore. The pauses feel different. The delays don't feel random anymore. Even the things that didn't work, they don't feel as pointless as they used to. That's not coincidence. That's alignment starting to feel real. But here's where it shifts, because now you don't get to stay unaware. Now when it happens again, you'll know. And knowing changes everything, because you won't be able to pretend it's just timing anymore. You'll feel it. That quiet nudge, that almost invisible redirection, and this time you won't rush past it, or maybe you will. But if you do, you won't be able to say you didn't notice. Sometimes it wasn't silence, it was you moving too fast to hear it. If this message found you at the right moment, comment, "I see it now." Stay connected with born into light if something in you is starting to understand. And that's where it gets different. Because noticing isn't the relief you think it is. It's heavier. It means the moment you feel that pause again, you'll recognize it instantly and hesitate for a different reason. Not confusion, responsibility. You ever wonder why the last few times felt harder than usual? Not louder, not clearer, just harder to ignore, like something was getting closer to the surface, and you almost said yes. That's the part you keep avoiding. You almost said yes to something you knew wasn't right, not fully wrong, just slightly off. And that slightly matters more than you think, because that's where it hides, not in obvious mistakes, in the almost correct choices that feel safe enough to accept. That's where you drift. But something didn't let you settle there. You felt it tighten. That subtle discomfort you tried to explain away, you told yourself you were overthinking. But what if you weren't thinking enough? What if that hesitation wasn't fear, but precision? Think about that. Why did peace only come after things fell apart? Why did clarity only arrive after you were forced to stop? That's not how it's supposed to work, right? Or maybe it is. Maybe clarity was never meant to come while you were moving forward. Maybe it only shows up when movement is interrupted. And that's why it kept happening like that. Not to punish you, to slow you down at exact points you couldn't see on your own. But here's the shift you're not ready for. Those interruptions, they're about to stop. Not because everything is fine now, because you're expected to recognize it before it happens. Yeah, no more last-second redirections. No more silent corrections after the fact. Now it happens earlier, quieter, more subtle, and if you miss it this time, it won't circle back the same way. That's not pressure. It just feels like it. It's actually trust, which is strange considering how many times you doubted it. But look at the pattern. Even when you resisted, you were still guided. Even when you ignored, you were still redirected. So what happens when you finally stop resisting before the interruption? That's the part you haven't experienced yet. And something in you knows that slight tension you feel right now, that's not anxiety. It's recognition trying to form, slowly, not fully clear, but enough to shift how you move next. Because the next moment won't feel dramatic. It'll feel normal, too normal. That's how you'll almost miss it again. A simple choice, a small decision, nothing extreme. But it will carry more weight than it appears. And you'll feel it right before you act. That tiny pause, that same pause. But this time, it won't be asking for your attention. It'll be waiting for your decision. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't need another sign. You've already had more than enough. What you needed was this exact awareness. Not louder signals, not clearer directions, just the ability to recognize what's already been happening. And now you can't unsee it, even if you try. Even if you go back to old patterns, something will feel off faster than before. That's not failure. That's progress becoming inconvenient, because now comfort won't feel the same. Old choices won't feel neutral. And the things you used to ignore, they'll stand out, sharp, unsettling, almost like they're calling you out without words. So when it happens again, and it will, pay attention to what doesn't fully sit right. Not what looks wrong, what feels slightly misaligned. That's where it begins, not with answers, with friction. And if you lean into that instead of rushing past it, you won't need to be stopped again. You'll stop yourself, right before the wrong path starts to feel right. Or maybe you'll test it one more time, just to see, just to be sure. And if you do, you already know what happens next. But this time, it won't feel the same. Not because the situation changes, but because you do. And that's where it gets harder, because once you see the pattern, you can't pretend it's random anymore. So when that moment comes again, and it's closer than you think. You won't just feel the pause, you'll feel what's behind it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough to make you stop mid-thought, and that's new, because before you only noticed after the wrong turn, after the delay, after the quiet correction. Now it happens before, right there in the middle of the choice. And here's something you haven't faced yet. What if the pause isn't there to stop you? What if it's there to watch what you choose? Yeah, that changes it, because now it's not interruption, it's exposure, not to something outside, but to what's actually leading you inside. Your habits, your impulses, the subtle pull you keep trusting without questioning. That's what gets revealed in that moment. Not the path, you. So when you feel that stillness again, don't rush to label it as guidance. It might not be guiding you. It might be showing you what's still unaligned. And that's why it feels uncomfortable, because it's not telling you what to do. It's showing you what you're about to do. There's a difference, a quiet one. But you'll feel it. Think back, just for a second. Not to what happened, but to what you almost chose before it happened. That version of you, the one right before the shift. Why were you about to go that way? What convinced you it made sense? Was it clarity or urgency? Was it alignment or relief? See? That's the layer you skipped. You focused on the outcome, but the real signal was in the intention. And now, that's what's being brought forward. Earlier, closer, clearer, but not in the way you expect, because clarity won't feel like certainty. It'll feel like tension you can't ignore anymore. Here's the part that might not sit well. You've been asking for direction, but what you're getting is responsibility, and those aren't the same. Direction tells you where to go. Responsibility shows you why you keep choosing the same turns. One feels safe, the other feels exposing, and you're standing right between them now. So when that next moment arrives, and it will feel small, almost unimportant, watch what rises in you first. Not your thoughts, your pull, that immediate lean towards something. That's where the answer hides. Not in what looks right, in what quietly pulls you before you think. And if you pause there just a second longer than usual, you'll notice something strange. The pull starts to fade, not completely, just enough for something else to surface, something slower, something you've ignored before because it didn't feel urgent, but it's there. It's always been there. You just didn't trust it because it didn't brush you. That's the difference now. You're starting to see which voice pushes and which one waits. One feels like movement, the other feels like truth. And they don't sound the same, they never did. But here's the shift you didn't expect. Even now, knowing all this, you can still choose the wrong one. Not because you're unaware, because you're human. And sometimes the familiar pull feels easier than the quiet truth. So this isn't about getting it perfect, it's about catching it earlier than before. That's it. Earlier recognition, earlier pause, earlier choice. And that slight difference, it changes everything that comes after. You won't always get a second interruption. You won't always be redirected at the last moment, because you're not where you used to be. You're here now, aware enough to choose before you're stopped. And when it happens that exact moment, you'll feel something you haven't felt before. Not confusion, not pressure, just a quiet knowing that doesn't argue, it doesn't push, it just stays, waiting. And what you do in that space, that brief, almost invisible space, that's what decides what happens next. Not fate, not timing, you. So when it comes again, don't look for a sign. Don't wait for something to block you. Just notice what's already there, right before you move, right before you decide, right before you repeat or don't. Because this time, it's not about being stopped. It's about whether you stop yourself. And that sounds simple until you're inside the moment, because in that exact second, it won't feel like a big decision. It'll feel small, harmless, almost automatic. That's the trap, not danger, not chaos, just something that feels familiar enough to trust. And you'll almost move forward without thinking. Almost, but something interrupts, not from outside, from within. Quieter than before, faster than before. Like a flicker you can miss if you blink mentally. Did you catch that? That tiny hesitation that doesn't ask for attention, it just appears, then waits. It doesn't fight you, it doesn't convince you, it reveals you. Here's where it deepens. Because that moment isn't testing your strength, it's exposing your default. What you do when no one is watching, when there's no pressure, when it's just you and the next move. That's what's being measured. Not the outcome, the instinct. And something in you already knows what your instinct has been. You don't need to replay it. You felt it too many times in your chest right before things shifted. That quiet, this might not be it. But you moved anyway, not recklessly, just slightly ahead of yourself. So now the moment stretches, not in time, but in awareness. You feel more inside it, more space between impulse and action. And in that space, there's something you've been avoiding. Not a voice, a truth that doesn't speak. It just sits there, uncomfortable, clear in a way that doesn't explain itself. And here's the contradiction you weren't expecting. The clearer it gets, the easier it is to ignore. Yeah, because it doesn't come with urgency. It doesn't push you to act. It actually makes you pause longer. And that pause feels inconvenient, like it slows everything down, like it interrupts your momentum. So part of you wants to skip it, move past it, get back to what feels easier. But that's where it flips. Because what feels easier has never led you where you actually wanted to go. You know that. You've seen how that plays out. Smooth starts, subtle misalignment, then correction. Again. But this time, there's no correction waiting at the end. That's the part you keep circling around. You felt it earlier when something shifted in how this works. It's not about being caught anymore. It's about being aware before you fall. And that changes the weight of everything. So now when you feel that familiar pull, the one that tries to rush you quietly, notice what it's asking for. Speed. It wants you to decide quickly, to move before you fully see, to act before you fully feel. Why? Why does it need you to move fast? What happens if you don't? What if you just stay there for a second longer than usual? That's where it gets uncomfortable. Because if you stay, you start to see what's underneath the pull. Not clearly, but enough. Enough to realize it's not aligned with where you've been trying to go. And that realization, it doesn't feel empowering. It feels disappointing, because it means you were about to choose it again. But don't rush past that. That moment of almost, that's where everything changes. Not when you get it right, when you catch it before you get it wrong. And here's something deeper. That quiet truth you feel in that pause, it doesn't come to control you. It comes to see if you'll meet it halfway. Not by understanding it, by trusting it, even when it doesn't explain itself, and you don't fully trust it yet. That's okay. You're not supposed to. Not completely. Because trust like that, it builds in these moments, right here, where you could go either way, where nothing is forcing you, where it's just you, and that subtle knowing that doesn't argue. So what do? Do you follow the pull again? Or do you sit with the pause long enough for something deeper to surface? Because something will surface. It always does. But only if you don't rush past it. Only if you stay just a second longer than feels comfortable. And when you do, you'll notice something shift. Not outside, inside. A kind of clarity that doesn't shout. It just settles, like it's been waiting for you to stop long enough to feel it. And in that moment, you'll realize something you've been close to understanding this whole time. Not fully, but close enough to change what you do next. Because the truth was never hidden from you. It was just quieter than everything you kept choosing over it. And now, it's right there again. Closer than before, not asking, not pushing, just waiting for you to finally move differently. And that differently isn't what you think. It's not louder, it's not more confident, it's actually slower. That's what feels wrong about it at first, because everything you've been used to pushes. This doesn't. It almost feels like doing nothing. And that's where you start to doubt it. You start asking yourself, is this hesitation or is this something else? Stay there. Don't answer too fast. Because the difference between hesitation and awareness is thinner than you realized. One comes from fear. The other comes from seeing too clearly, too early. And you're not used to that. Not yet. So when that stillness stretches, and it will stretch, you'll feel a subtle tension build. Not panic, not urgency, just pressure to move, to break the pause, to get back into motion. Why does that pressure feel so familiar? Why does it sound like you? Because it is you. Or at least the version of you that learned to move before fully seeing. The one that chose speed over alignment. The one that chose speed over alignment. The one that trusted momentum more than stillness. But something is shifting inside that pattern. You can feel it. It's not as automatic as before. There's a delay now, a gap. And inside that gap, you're starting to notice something you used to miss completely. Not a signal, a separation. Between what you want and what you're about to choose, that's new. And it's uncomfortable, because now you can see the misalignment before it happens. You can feel it forming, that slight disconnect, that quiet, this isn't it. But here's the contradiction. Seeing it doesn't make it easier. It actually makes the choice heavier, because now you can't hide behind not knowing. Now it's clear enough to feel, but not loud enough to force you. So you stand there, between two movements, one that feels familiar, one that feels unknown, and neither one is screaming at you. That silence, unknown, and neither one is screaming at you. That silence, that's where everything is decided, not in action, in what you allow to guide it. And here's where it goes deeper. That quiet truth you've been sensing, it's not trying to replace your choices, it's trying to refine them, not take control, just adjust direction before you commit. But you keep expecting it to feel stronger, more obvious, more certain. Why? Why does truth have to feel intense for you to trust it? What if its softness is the point? What if the lack of pressure is what makes it real? Think about it. Everything that rushed you before, where did it lead? Quick decisions, temporary clarity, then correction. Again, but this doesn't rush. It doesn't even compete. It just stays, quietly, consistently, right there in the pause. And you've been brushing past it for so long, you forgot what it feels like to stay with it, to let it settle, to let it unfold without forcing it into words. Because it won't always explain itself. That's the part you resist. You want understanding before action, but it asks for alignment before explanation. And that's where trust begins to form, not when you fully understand, but when you choose it without needing to. So now, when that moment comes again, and it will feel almost identical, watch what happens inside you. Not what you think, what you lean toward. That subtle internal movement, that's where everything reveals itself, not outside, inside. And if you catch it just before it turns into action, you'll feel something shift, a kind of clarity that doesn't argue, doesn't explain, doesn't push. It just becomes obvious, in a way that's hard to describe, but impossible to ignore once you feel it. And that's the point you've been moving toward this whole time. Not answers, not signs, that moment. That exact moment where you see clearly enough to choose differently without being stopped. Because what's coming next, It won't wait for you to figure it out after. It won't circle back. It won't interrupt at the last second. It will meet you right there, in that quiet space before the move. And it will leave the rest entirely up to you. And that's the part that almost feels unfair. Because before something stepped in, before something adjusted things when you didn't, now it doesn't. Now it watches, not in a distant way, in a way that feels closer than before, closer to your thoughts than before, closer to that split second where you decide without realizing. You feel that, don't you? That subtle shift from being guided to being seen, not judged, seen, exactly as you are in that moment. And here's what you haven't fully faced yet. You don't always choose what you say you want. You choose what feels familiar in the moment, even if it leads somewhere you've already outgrown. Why? Why does the familiar still pull you stronger than the truth you've been sensing? Because the familiar doesn't ask you to change. The truth does. And change doesn't announce itself as growth. It feels like loss at first, like you're letting go of something that almost worked, something that almost felt right, that almost again. It keeps showing up, not to confuse you, to show you where you keep settling, but this time that almost won't feel acceptable anymore. Not after everything you've started to notice, not after how clearly you've begun to see that gap. And here's the contradiction. You might still choose it once more, even knowing, even feeling the pause, even recognizing the pattern, not because you're failing, because you're testing it, seeing if it really plays out the same, seeing if maybe, just maybe, this time is different. But deep down you already know. You already feel the ending before it begins, that slight tension before the step, that quiet resistance you can't explain. So if you still move forward, you won't be surprised by what follows. You'll just be aware of it sooner. And that awareness, it won't feel comforting. It'll feel sharp, immediate, undeniable. That's the shift. Not in what happens, in how quickly you recognize it. And recognition like that, it shortens the distance between action and truth. You won't drift as far as before. You won't stay as long as before, because something in you will catch it faster. But here's where it deepens even more. Eventually, catching it after won't be enough. You'll feel that subtle dissatisfaction even when you correct yourself. Because you'll know you could have chosen differently from the start. And that realization, that's what changes everything. Not instantly, but permanently. Because once you feel that, once you truly see how early the signal was, you won't want to wait until after anymore. You'll want to catch it before, right there, at the beginning. And that's where you're being led. Not to perfection, to precision. So the next time that moment forms, and it will feel quiet, almost invisible, pay attention to how early the knowing shows up. Not after the thought, before it finishes. That's new. That's deeper than anything you've experienced so far. Because now it's not just about pausing before action. It's about noticing before the decision even feels complete. And that's where it becomes undeniable. That this was never about signs, never about timing, never about luck. It was about whether you would learn to recognize it in time. And you're almost there. Not fully, but close enough to feel the difference forming, close enough to sense that the next moment won't be like the others because something has already shifted, quietly, subtly, without announcing itself. And when it shows up again, in that same still, almost missed space, you won't be the same version of yourself standing in it. You'll be the one who knows exactly when the choice begins. And once you see the beginning, you can't pretend it starts later anymore. No more blaming the outcome, no more calling it after it happened. You'll know, right at the edge of it, that invisible line where a thought becomes a direction. And here's what changes quietly. You stop waiting for things to feel wrong. You start noticing when they're slightly off. Not enough to alarm you, but enough to ask for your attention. That's where the real shift lies. Not in big decisions, in the subtle lean you almost ignore. So when it happens again, that small moment, that familiar pause, don't look for confirmation. Just notice what stays steady and what tries to rush you past it. One will feel calm but uncertain. The other will feel certain but restless. You've followed the restless one before. You know where that leads. This time, just stay a second longer. That's it. No forcing. No overthinking. Just don't move immediately. And in that space, something will settle into place. Not loudly, but clearly enough for you to feel the difference. Because it was never about hearing something new. It was about finally recognizing what's been there the whole time. So when you leave this moment and step back into your life, watch closely. Not everything, just the next choice that feels slightly important. The one that seems normal on the surface. That's where it will be, waiting. And this time, it won't try again and again. It won't repeat the same way. Because now, you're the one who decides before it has to. Now you know, it was never about being ignored, it was about learning to notice. If you're ready to move differently from here, subscribe and stay with this path. Because you're not lost, you're just starting to see like a chosen one.